pleased to say the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, is ready to talk to us. Good morning to you, Chancellor. I was quite struck by the fact that you said Labour is delivering higher living standards for the people of this country. In what way is that happening?
The OBR forecast yesterday shows that the real household disposable income per person will be £500 greater at the end of the Parliament compared with the plans that I inherited. And obviously the last Parliament was the worst on record for living standards, and the OBR confirmed yesterday that real household disposable income will increase in every year of this Parliament. I recognise that the cost of living crisis continues to bite. I'm not complacent about the challenges that families face with their finance, but for the last few months wages have been rising at about twice the rate of inflation, and that is welcome news after the double-digit inflation that was inflicted upon us in the last Parliament.
You're a government going for growth. That has been your clear message, but you stood on your feet yesterday and admitted that the growth forecast had been halved. But it's not your fault. You blamed Liz Truss and her mini-budget, the Conservative inheritance, the changing world and global insecurity. Why do you seem to want to blame everyone and everything but yourself? Do you not take any responsibility for the political decisions that you have made and the consequences of the budget that you laid out in October?
Well, global growth has been revised down, and I think people can see around us that the world is changing and Britain is not immune from some of those pressures. But in every other year, the OBR have revised up their growth forecast and say that by the end of the Parliament, the economy will be bigger than they previously envisaged. So if you take that in the round, that is an economy that is growing. The economy is forecast still to grow more this year than it did last year. Am I satisfied with the numbers? No, of course I'm not. I want to go further and faster to grow the economy, which is why we took the planning and infrastructure bill to Parliament this week. It got through its second reading. That will enable us to build the homes, the infrastructure that our country needs. The pensions bill next month to improve our capital markets, the regulatory reform to make it easier to get things done in Britain. So there is much that we are doing, much that we have already done. And the Office of Budget Responsibility did say yesterday that the planning reforms that we've already brought in will make our economy bigger and will bring in more tax revenue, which is much needed to fund our public services, particularly our NHS, but also to make sure that we've got money for defence, which is obviously so crucial at these challenging times. Yes,
but the entire growth process is going to be built on the housing sector, isn't it? Which is problematic. I mean, it's all your chickens, all your eggs in one basket. At a time when, on the 1st of April, of course, we see this new national insurance for employers rise coming in, which a lot of small businesses say is going to cripple them and certainly stop them hiring new people.
The Office of Budget Responsibility forecasts that house building will reach a 40-year high, and that's very good news for young families and people who want to get on the housing ladder. But home ownership has been falling in these last few years. So getting houses built and actually training up young people to work in the construction industry with the 60,000 additional training places that we announced at the weekend will make a big difference, not just to get the houses built, but also to get good jobs for young people, paying decent wages. And if you get those skills in the construction sector, you're never going to be out of work. You're going to have a good job and security and prosperity for your family. So the plans that we have are beginning to bear fruit. And look, on the national insurance increase, the smallest businesses are exempt. If you employ, for example, 4 people at the national living wage, you won't pay any national insurance whatsoever. But I do recognise that any tax change will have consequences. But the alternative was to leave the public finances in a precarious position and not put the money into the NHS. And as a result of the changes we've made, we have managed for 5 months in a row now to bring down NHS waiting lists with an additional 2 million appointments in just the first 8.5 months of this Labour government. So we are delivering the change that we promised on public services without increasing the taxes that working people pay. pay. But of course we've got to do more to kickstart growth in our economy. It was never possible to turn things around overnight, but I do believe we are beginning to move in the right direction.
Well, you mentioned that growth that has been forecasted by the OBR, but towards the end of your government, potential, though, that could be wiped out by President Trump's tariffs. How are you going to be responding to those?
Well, since our Prime Minister Keir Starmer went to the White House to meet President Donald Trump a few weeks ago, there have been intense talks going on between our two countries on an economic agreement, and those talks are in a crucial stage at the moment, ahead of the increase in tariffs that the US President has planned for next week. So we are working hard to secure a good deal for Britain, and we've got a few more days to do that.
The final point, I know you've been confronted with this before, but it's got to be addressed, hasn't it? We're talking to a former Home Affairs Minister this morning who said you're the weakest link in Cabinet. How do you change that?
Well, the Cabinet are working together on our plan for change. I'm tasked with growing the economy, and the OBR forecast that the economy will be bigger in this Parliament than it previously would have been. But the changes we've made to secure our public finances also mean record investment going into our NHS, which has enabled us to bring down waiting lists. The money that's going into schools is enabling us to roll out free breakfast clubs in all primary schools. We've found £2.2 billion for defence next year, taking defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, something the Conservatives promised but never delivered. So by securing our public finances, by making some of those difficult decisions on tax, welfare and on spending, we are able to invest in the things that I believe are our nation's priorities, and we'll get on continuing to do that job.
Chancellor, we're out of time with you, I'm afraid, this morning. Thank you very much. Now, drivers over 70 will lose more freedoms on the road under a little-known policy.
Yes, it means older drivers will have to apply for separate permits if they want to drive heavier vehicles and minibuses.
Well, is this right? Well, to debate this, we're joined by criminal defence lawyer Paul Britton and former MEP and environmental campaigner Stanley Johnson. Morning, gentlemen. Good to see you. Paul, let's start with you. What do you make of it?
Straight in at the deep end. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. These vehicles that the policy is going to impose restrictions on are much more cumbersome, heavier to drive, and can cause more risk to other vehicles and pedestrians. The chance of being a casualty if you're hit by a larger vehicle, whiplash or other injuries, vastly increased, is so that yeah, it's a good policy to introduce.
You're a danger on the road, Stanley.
I think this is a symptom of people ganging up on older people. I actually consider myself not as an older person. I'm only 85, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to drive for another 20 years. But I worry about this effort to discriminate against the older people. Imagine you're an older person, you have this thing hanging over you. Oh my God, I'm quite soon going to be able to retake my driving test. I think we've got to be really careful before we go down this route. So I'm dead against it.
Stanley, it's not about discriminating on age. It's about looking at the probability of having an accident when you reach a certain age. I mean, if we were going to say it's discrimination, we could say that we discriminate against under 18-year-olds by not allowing them to drive at all. But they lack the cognitive ability to manoeuvre a car safely.
Now, I'm not sure what cognitive ability means. What does cognitive ability mean? That's far too difficult a word for me. I take some statistics here. It has been shown that the elderly have three times fewer accidents, the over 70s, than the age group.
As a percentage of the number of people that drive within that category. But overall, what you see on the data, and actually the Office of National Statistics has changed the way that they report it now. But if we look at data from 2022, for example, we see a sharp increase in the number of casualties resulting from the over 75 category.
Well, are you saying then, Paul, that actually people should have to forget the bigger vehicles, get to 70 or 75, and you should have to be regularly retaking a general driving test?
I think so, and I think actually it will preserve mobility of the elderly if we can start to identify which of them are able to continue driving safely.
Okay, and this is police state. This is really, I am horrified to hear a respected lawyer. I mean, you're not just a self-say, you're a proper lawyer. You know, you're not a
proper lawyer.
Yeah, you know, not a chap who says he's a solicitor. You are a solicitor. You've got a firm, and you are saying that actually elderly people. And when I say elderly, I mean, you know, you're talking about over 70. As far as I'm concerned, 70, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro twice between my 70th and 80th birthday, and I'm planning to do it again. I think the idea that you should discriminate in this way against old people so they can think, oh, my God, people like Paul Britton are saying, you're going to have another test. You know, bad enough having had one. I can actually read every single word. It says, lawyer Paul Britton and former MEP Environmental Commissioner Stanley Johnson.
Stanley, to be fair.
But Stanley, you shouldn't object to being tested then if your eyesight's perfect, because you won't fall foul of it. But as a lawyer, as a respected lawyer, I can be objective. You know, I'm not 84, Stanley, and looking at this from my own perspective, I'm looking at this and it's data-driven, it's on the facts.
Well, but you've got to say, in countries like Spain, I don't know about anywhere else in the EU, but in Spain, over a certain age, you have to have a test, and it's not out on the road test, but a sort of in a simulator sort of test.
New Zealand, Australia and parts of the United States too.
Well, I want to just read you the statistics here. And a Swansea University study found that drivers aged 70 were involved in 3 to 4 times fewer accidents than men aged between 17 to 21.
You can't deny that. Maybe we should. If you want to do this to older people, Paul, maybe you need to stop people from.
Steve, this is
don't allow them to drive till they're 25.
We're targeting the 17 to 21, the least experienced group of all of the data. Look, people have got to start somewhere, and if we start saying to 17 to 21-year-olds, you can't drive, how are they going to go to work? How are they ever going to become good drivers?
Let me tell you one other thing, which this sort of conversation leads to. OK, I'm over 70. I'm actually over 80. I'm actually going to be over 90. I want to drive when I go on holiday. You find nowadays, when you ring up EasyJet or whatever, oh, no, we can't let you drive a car. I'm sorry, you can't have a package which includes driving a car because you're too old. This is real nonsense.
No, Stanley, isn't it reassuring if you went and took a test and you could prove that you were safe on the roads? Isn't it reassuring for you that you're not going to cause someone an injury or a fatality? I mean, if it were me, I would want that reassurance.
No, but that would apply to all of us, though, wouldn't it, Paul? I mean, you know, all that by the grace of God do we drive to and from every day without having accidents. On that logic, we should all retake our tests every 2 years.
See, the data doesn't support it for the other age categories, save as maybe the 17 to 25.
Well, I was right about that.
They are an exception. You know, post 40 up until 75, those categories are an all-time low of causing fatalities and casualties. So I wouldn't say it was proportionate to affect them, but I would say over 75, and I don't mean disproportionately, 3 to 5 years.
We are moving towards a police state, and this is a powerfully bad step in that direction, and it needs to be resisted. We've got to get our minds around the demography here. 70 is not old any longer. This is nonsense. There are 5 million people who are over 70 with driving licenses. You can't ask all those people to take new tests.
I've got to ask you... Oh, sorry, darling, go on.
I was just going to say, we're out of time, gentlemen.
I was just going to ask Paul how old you are.
I'm 41.
Right, so in another...
Got a few more years, then.
I reckon in another 28 years... you'll be campaigning in the opposite direction.
Swap sides, Stanley, in 28 years.
I think so.
OK.
I think so.
Well, we'll see.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.